and that we shouldn't be contributing to the conflict and pretending that we're going to have something to do with humanitarian aid. Everything we do overseas is for humanitarian reasons. That's why we had to go in and get Saddam Hussein, and Assad has to go. All of it is couched in the fact they're killing their own people. They're gassing their own people. You have to learn not to believe very much of what our government tells us. That's pure propaganda.
Hey Nutmeggers, welcome to the 170th episode of Primo Nutmeg. This is another edition in my Megastar March series. All month long, the biggest guests in Primo Nutmeg history are returning. On today's show, former U.S. Congressman and U.S. presidential candidate Dr. Ron Paul is back. We're going to talk about what's happening in Venezuela, the 2020 presidential race, the collapsing RussiaGate conspiracy theory, and Dr. Paul is going to give his thoughts on Noam Chomsky and libertarian socialism. Folks, you aren't going to want to miss 1 second of this interview with Dr. Ron Paul here on Primo Nutmeg. While you're listening, please do like, share, comment, and subscribe. And also become a patron for only $1 a month at patreon.com/Primo Nutmeg. There, for only $1 a month, not only will you get access to hours and hours of content from the earlier seasons, you'll also help support a truly independent media outlet. Thanks everyone for listening, and now without any further ado, here's my Megastar March interview with Dr. Ron Paul. Dr. Paul, welcome back to Primo Nutmeg.
Good to be with you today.
Again, I'm sorry I couldn't actually be with you in person. I had planned on meeting you in person today, but unfortunately, as I just mentioned, I had a lot of trouble with flights last night. I ended up pretty much flying all over the country, so I apologize about that. Hopefully I can get down to Clute at some point. The first thing I wanted to bring up that's been in the news a lot lately is what's going on in Venezuela. And, you know, I think that a lot of libertarians and folks on the right have been very critical of the Venezuelan government for a while, especially because it calls itself a socialist government. However, I think that another aspect of that is also, what the U.S. has done in terms of sanctions and also now trying to back this coup. What's your own take on that? I mean, is there a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela? Should the U.S. government be doing anything now or in the future to mitigate that?
Yeah, the word humanitarian is so misused that I'd have to have a careful definition of it, because I think it's always an excuse to go in. They always, our government and our politicians, no matter whether it's domestic or foreign, they're always saying how compassionate they are and take care of people, and we have to be humanitarians and take care of the world. So in my estimation, I would say that it all depends on the definition. There's a crisis going on, and we've contributed to it, and it puts you in a situation where, you're going to pick sides down in Venezuela, and I don't think that's my job. I can have maybe some sympathies on one side or the other. I think, from my viewpoint, having been in politics and stay interested, that my job is to try to call attention to how we've contributed to things. And even though we don't need activism, but how could we help? And maybe we could help in doing the opposite of what we do, and that is put on sanctions, threaten people, invade people, work on coups, and all these kind of things. That's the kind of interference that I don't like. But we could offer friendliness and visitation and trade in spite of their shortcomings. I mean, we've done that with China and Russia until recently. It was going well until somebody decided we had to have a Cold War. So I think it's our policy that I think is important, but I do think that we contributed significantly to the crisis by being involved for the past 10 years.
And, I think it's interesting looking at the 2020 election, because so many politicians have kind of fallen in line, as per usual, with the military-industrial complex and supported the coup in Venezuela. Bernie Sanders had tweeted a few weeks ago, "The people of Venezuela are enduring a serious humanitarian crisis. The Maduro government must put the needs of its people first, allow humanitarian aid into the country, and refrain from violence against protesters. And there were a lot of folks on the left who were critical of Bernie Sanders for making that statement. Abby Martin was one, Max Blumenthal was another, and Roger Waters from the band Pink Floyd. I don't know if you're familiar with that band, but Roger Waters, he responded, "Bernie, are you effing kidding me? If you buy the Trump, Bolton, Abrams, Rubio line humanitarian intervention and collude in the destruction of Venezuela, you cannot be a credible candidate for president of the USA. Or maybe you can, maybe you're the perfect stooge for the 1%. Again, as somebody who's been involved in politics for a while, why do you think it is that Bernie Sanders, who again is supposed to be this radical figure on the far left, why do you think it is that he might be supporting this call for humanitarian intervention?
Well, I think it's just an excuse because there's two sides to pick from, and if you're a true libertarian, you cannot jump on the bandwagon and say, boy, I sure hope that Maduro wins this battle and kicks out everybody and everything is settled and he can have his own socialism or a Guaido. And so I think that you have disagreements among individuals like this, Republicans and Democrats and different progressives. It's sort of understandable and predictable. What is common, though, is they all believe that we have this obligation to pick these sides for one reason or another. And that, of course, is why we're in a mess, is they've been picking sides for way too long. We're in 120 or close to 150 countries, always being involved and causing these troubles and throwing our weight around, putting our military around and using sanctions and all kinds of things. So for them to have a little bit of a spat on it. But I think as soon as they invoke, and we mentioned it in the introduction, as soon as they start invoking humanitarianism, it's such a farce because if they were honest with themselves, when you send in food to a place like this, they say, oh, well, Maduro doesn't even want to let the people have food and people are going to starve. That has nothing to do with what's going on. If you're for people sending in food, you're for sending in weapons, and you're sending people in that are going to participate in a coup that we're organizing. And we have been. We've been involved with Guaido for probably, since he was in high school. He was being trained to do exactly what he's doing. And there may be at times when he might say the right thing about, Maduro. But that's for their business. They have to sort that out. One thing for sure is that it's not easy for a libertarian to pick sides on that. We should pick the sides on what we should be doing and argue the case that will contribute to peace and that we shouldn't be contributing to the conflict and pretending that we're going to have something to do with humanitarian aid. Everything we do overseas is for humanitarian reasons. That's why we had to go in and get Saddam Hussein. And, Assad has to go. All of it is couched in the fact they're killing their own people. They're gassing their own people. You have to learn not to believe very much of what our government tells us. That's pure propaganda. And I had to listen to it for so long, it was pretty disgusting.
Well, again, what's interesting to me is looking at the 2020 election, because it seems like Bernie Sanders is kind of trying to have his cake and eat it too, where he's trying to position himself as a peace candidate, but he's also adopting some of this rhetoric also in regards to quote-unquote Russian meddling in the 2016 election. And the candidate who I find most interesting actually is Tulsi Gabbard, and she's been very vocal against what she's called the new Cold War. She's been vocal against neoconservatives and neoliberals in both parties pursuing regime change wars, often talking about the prospect of nuclear war and critical of Donald Trump for pulling out of the INF treaty. So are you familiar with Tulsi Gabbard? And if so, just what are your thoughts on her campaign?
Well, yes, I am familiar with her. I think she's great on foreign policy. And if people are wondering who to support and how to look at this, there is no doubt she's on the right track. We could say yes, keep going, and put the pressure on. But these other people, you can't trust them. Sanders or anybody else, they all have it's all self-serving. Rubio, how can anybody trust him? He's part of the neocon crowd. He's part of the Bolton crowd and Abrams crowd. He's all that, which is just horrible. And so, the squabble that they're having with the Democrats, I just hope Tulsi keeps going. I'll bet she's going to, if she sticks with it, she'll find out there's more support for her than you'd be led to believe. I think that's what I found out in my campaigns. I thought this was an idiotic thing, is to say that, some of the things coming at us is a responsibility and a blowback from our own foreign policy. And lo and behold, there were a bunch of people out there that there's a time somebody said this, and I think that's what would happen with Tulsi. That's why we should encourage her without being involved with our government policies, other than the fact that in a negative way, that is, no militancy and no threats and no pretense, but to say, look, what we think we should be doing if they improve themselves, we should be talking to you. We shouldn't be putting on sanctions, and we shouldn't be dealing with all the world with threats and intimidations and freezing of assets, and then ultimately, if you don't behave, where there will be a coup. And that's what we're involved in Venezuela right now, because there would be no battle down there right now without Guaido getting support from us.
It's kind of funny also to see how the corporate media treats Tulsi Gabbard. They don't include her in polls, and it's so obvious that the corporate media wants the race to really be between somebody like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And you even saw this just hours before Tulsi Gabbard officially announced that she was running. NBC News came out with this report, which included data from this company, New Knowledge, which recently also got caught creating fictitious Russian troll accounts. And the report that NBC News put out against Tulsi Gabbard was really somewhat of a smear campaign, it seemed like, saying that Russia is going to be supporting her campaign. And again, that sort of all dovetails into this general sort of neo-McCarthyism, I would say, or just hysteria that we have about Russian interference. RussiaGate has become such a big thing, right? It's not even one claim anymore. Part of it is about Trump-Russia collusion. Part of it is social media trolls. Part of it is the Guccifer 2.0 emails. Part of it's the WikiLeaks emails. I just would like your own take, when you kind of look at RussiaGate and the hysteria over it, what do you think is true, and what do you think would be a more appropriate response than the mass hysteria that the corporate media has exhibited over the past 2 years?
Well, I'd like to see it be a general mass movement in this country and doing away with special prosecutors. I think that is so bad. What is going on has nothing to do with justice. I think there's about 5 significant people in the FBI and others who really did get caught, and they were on the side of righteousness and on the side of truth. But I think Mueller offers nothing positive. If you looked, I think it was just yesterday that they were debating or having this resolution against hate. We're all against hate. We have to deal with this. You can't have anybody saying anything that's hateful. And I was thinking, why doesn't somebody get up there and say, well, why don't we make a law against expressing and motivating everything you do directed with hate against the president? And I'm not a president. I'm not a Trump supporter, in a sense. But it's just unbelievable on how they get off on tangents. But I think this whole investigation on RussiaGate is... there's something there, but not very much. And it just was an excuse for the people who like to make money in the weapons industry, and also wanted to restart the Cold War, and that was a big deal, I think, in Ukraine. The way that occurred, we were so much involved in that, and yet the media was able to paint that as, it was all Russia, so Russia did it. It was they who did it. So I think that the RussiaGate is an example of extremism at its worst.
Do you think that there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian intelligence or the Kremlin?
Well, there may have been, but what is the definition of collusion? The people, the conspiracy movement, have you been conspiring? And he's conspiring to undermine it. Well, I think collusion and conspiracy, you and I right now are colluding. We're talking about issues, and we're trying to direct people to think more sensibly. So we're colluding. And when we meet in groups, when I meet with libertarian friends and get involved in the monetary issue and talk about things, I would like to conspire a bit. Just think of all the people now sick and tired of what we have that feel so desperate to get out of the system. They're leaving the country and they're talking about, well, how do we escape the financial system? So they come along and they get involved with cryptography and cryptocurrencies. Well, they're conspiring all the time. So this whole idea of collusion, I mean, if you think of all the countries in the world, that we talk to, and they think nothing of it. Presidents talk to them. They visit in the middle of campaigns, and they have members from other governments come, and they appear in our Congress and hearings right in the midst of campaigns. But all of a sudden, if there's anybody doing it, of significance, no. I don't think there was any big conspiracy where Russia was going to dictate, the next president, because I just don't think they could or would.
What I find very interesting about it, too, is that the accusation seems to be that Russia helped Trump so that Trump could then be subservient to Russia. But it seems like that's not really what's happening, right? I mean, there's so many instances of, Trump selling weapons to Ukraine, of him tearing up the INF treaty, of backing this coup in Venezuela. And it just seems like there's this real logical disconnect. So the corporate media is so in favor of this Venezuelan coup, which is being pushed by Trump. So if Trump is a Putin puppet, then wouldn't this Guaido also be a Putin puppet as well? It just seems like the logic doesn't follow.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think the way I see it, and I have no way of knowing because I don't think I have any more insight to the inner workings of the president's brain and why he does certain things. Does one thing one day and then it's reversed the next day. But my sense is that he's a good businessman. He's made a lot of money. He's international. He builds buildings all over, and he works hard to have an entrepreneurial name that he literally sells and gets his name on things and didn't have to take as much risk. So he did that, and he was dealing with the Russians, very much so. I'm sure he was. There's probably business dealings, and some of those business dealings might have overflowed, and Trump was very blunt about why he supported Democrats as well and city people. He says, well, that's the way you do business. That's the way this country works. You have to talk to the politicians. So I'm sure he talked to the Russians as well. But when Trump won, and he might have had a little surprise, and certainly the rest of the country had a real shocker when he won. So I think he's probably uncomfortable where he is, because I think his gut instincts have been pretty good, much better when he didn't have to worry about politics, because, he came out against the Iraq war, and he still comes out against those things. But then somebody, the Rubios and the others, get him and they badger him. He says, okay, I did want to get out of Syria, but I guess we better keep him there for a while longer. I don't think he had to put up with that stuff when he was in private industry. So we who want to try to evaluate, we're frustrated too about trying to know what to expect. But the people who disagree with him, because he is an outsider, he's unpredictable, and they don't own him, so that's why they're furious. They hate his guts and they'll do anything, to destroy him. And I would like to encourage him to be more consistent and become a libertarian. But just look at how he handles the Federal Reserve. He's not close to a libertarian position, but I don't think he hates libertarians. He actually listens to them and visits with my son. So, that can't hurt anything. It doesn't mean that Rand will have tremendous influence, but I think Trump has some of those instincts, but they can get knocked around so quickly. So it's our job is to try to sort it out and predict what's going to happen tomorrow.
But his foreign policy really hasn't been any sort of break from precedent, right? I mean, maybe the North Korea talks, but beyond that, everything that he's doing, you could see Obama or George W. Bush doing as well, right?
I think that's true. I think on policy-wise, you would come to that. And he has all the same advisors. I mean, the neocons are his close advisors, and that's why I think when he does something from instinct, they come in and bombard him. But There's one measurement that I think if you took and looked at for these, he's been there, 3 years? If you take his 3 years versus the first 3 years of the last 10 presidents, I bet less military personnel in this country died. That doesn't mean that we're free and that we've turned a bend and we become non-interventionists. But I think he is not he's anxious to threaten, but he's not been marching the troops in, and Teddy Roosevelt used to say that you got to speak soft and carry a big stick. I think Trump speaks loudly and carries a weaker stick. But I think your position is very reasonable, that philosophically nothing really has changed. So even if he is, less likely to start a major war, he's not trying to, but tomorrow something could happen. I mean, what if some missile gets loose in the South China Sea? Why are we finding bombers, next to Russia, next to China, and just antagonizing people? So he's setting the stage for, a false flag or an unintended consequence or whatever. So I just hope that we don't have to go into these wars where we talk about thousands and thousands of Americans being killed, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people that we're killing. We've had so much of that, and the news has been a tinge better in the last 3 years. But your point is right. If the philosophy doesn't change, we will always be vulnerable to the mistakes.
So I actually did want to spend the last few minutes that we have talking about philosophy, just because the last person I interviewed was Noam Chomsky. Do you know who Noam Chomsky is?
Yes, I do. I have not met him, but I know him.
And
I know of him.
It seems like the two of you, in terms of foreign policy, are very much on the same page. But where you obviously show a big difference is in terms of economic philosophy and, capitalism and socialism, a free market, versus a more, I guess he would term it, democratic market. And what Noam Chomsky's big objection seems to be to capitalist libertarianism is that a free market, in his view, would be empowering private institutions to have dictatorial control over people's lives, and that it would create sort of a neo-feudalism, and that, if people can just fire you and take away your livelihood, that in itself is a form of violence. It's not the same thing as a police officer shooting you, but it is also a form of violence. So I just would like your response to that. Why is that not the case? Why is not having, democratic control of workplaces, this sort of anarcho-syndicalism, why is that not the truly free option before us?
Well, he has a right point, and I'd probably agree with a whole lot of that, especially on the police, because I've spoken out strongly on this. But I think what he doesn't grasp is the non-aggressor's principle, because he's criticizing something that I probably criticize more than he does, and that is corporatism, crony capitalism. This is horrible. But that didn't pop up out of freedom. That popped out of, government. They're always government protected. The government, the whole Federal Reserve System. I don't know its position on the Federal Reserve, but you can't be for the people, you can't be for liberty, and you can't be for getting rid of the corporations unless you have an understanding of the monetary system. And I would guess that he would say, no, we just have to modify it a little bit. Maybe the new approach to monetary system, pass the money out to the poor people, will take care of it. But no, I think where the disagreement would be on the use of violence, and he sees the corporate world. I mean, just look at, I was so optimistic about the greatness that would come out of social media. It turns out they're partners with the government.
Right.
If the government's not allowed to spy on us, well, the telephone companies will, and the social medias will. So that's corporatism at its worst. Now, I know the one thing is, this is all, it comes up frequently. I do know a few over the years that were very, very good on civil liberties and on foreign policy, but we disagree on economic policies because they had extra sympathy to make sure that the poor would be taken care of. One is Dennis Kucinich. He was one of my closest friends, and we worked a lot on issues. Ralph Nader is somebody who's progressive, and he's very good, and I respect him an awful lot. But I've talked to him a little bit about this subject. That crony capitalism, this type of system we have today, inevitably over history works toward a fascist system. And fascism can exist with ownership still being in the hands of the private entrepreneur, and that's what's happening now. I mean, that's why I don't think this march, Bernie Sanders and those others, this march towards socialism. We're not going to have socialism, but we better worry about this system that's becoming very, very dangerous. And Chomsky and I bet you would agree on a lot of that it is a very dangerous situation, especially because they make all this money, or not all of it. The big deal is the military-industrial complex, and it's huge. But I would like to, someday I'll go check and see exactly where he is on monetary policy. But you cannot represent the people and try to challenge this ruthlessness in the corporate banking world without looking at the monetary system and getting rid of this idea that you have a private organization who has total monopoly control of creating money out of thin air. It's the world currency. It's the reserve currency of the world, and they get to distribute the money, but they don't distribute it to the poor. And the main goal now, is supposed to be unemployment and price stability. But they have another goal, and that is maintaining the stock market at a certain level. And our president certainly agrees with that.
Well, just to let you know, because I have interviewed both you and Chomsky a few times, it seems like the two of you do agree on, 70% of the issues, I'd say. I think a main point of difference is around economic philosophy and especially usage of terms, what qualifies as capitalism or as socialism. Yeah. Even that being said, he says that he does not want state force, military force being used to stop people from associating that way if they freely choose to do so. In a truly free society, wouldn't there be different economic systems in different places? And wouldn't some people be allowed voluntarily to have what some might call anarcho-capitalism?
Sure. If certain people, for example, decide we want to be slaves, I don't think they should be stopped. I don't expect it to happen if the options are available, but I wouldn't like to see a society in which the force, concentrated force, including military force, blocks a group of people who say we want to be slaves of some master. And if people say we want to rent ourselves to somebody, which is temporary slavery, as classical liberals described it, I don't think that should be barred. But I think that better options can be provided, which people will accept.
Which I think you would say the same thing about libertarian socialism, is that if people want to form a commune, they should be free to. Yeah. So it seems like the libertarian left and libertarian right, at the end of the day, could and should agree that in a free society, people should be free to engage in whatever forms of economic association that they choose.
Yeah, no, that's the point. But a libertarian a decent libertarian is very willing to allow you and another group to become socialists. You take care of yourself, but don't come with a gun and take from us. And that I think is good. But the authoritarians, the people who want to reorganize the world, and the same ones that want to reorganize the economic system, they want to reorganize the social system and the world system. And that is the part they do not tolerate, libertarians at all. They can't stand libertarians because we would, just show them up so badly because, a little bit of an introduction to that would be the Amish or Mennonites. I mean, they're not bad capitalists, right? But they don't take care of themselves. They take care of all their medical needs. And it's all voluntarism. And they say, yeah, but look, they're not very advanced in culture. And sometimes I think maybe they're better off without some of this stuff that's going on, because the more we advance technologically, the more the government uses it against us, and the more the government uses it to fight wars. But we don't advance sociologically, and that involves the libertarian principle of non-aggression. And that's so simple and clear. It's been around for thousands of years, all the way back to way even before the Ten Commandments, that you weren't supposed to lie, cheat, steal, or kill. It's so fundamental, and yet the governments lie. They lie and they cheat us and they steal from us and they kill us. And they kill a lot of people. So and we don't make a whole lot of progress in that area. The only time you see progress is when the communities are isolated. You tell, I don't know the statistics, but I wonder how often there's a murder occurred in a Mennonite or Amish community. Probably not as much as in the socialized cities like Detroit and Chicago. They have a list every weekend. So I think that this voluntarism would show up the authoritarians so badly that they cannot stand that. They would not tolerate that, and so therefore they would not allow. They don't want us to opt out.
Well, Dr. Paul, I know that we're running over, so I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. Hopefully I can come and meet you in person next time. But for folks out there who want to stay up to date with you, where can they go to do that?
Well, most important is the RonPaulLibertyReport.com. I do a daily program. I just finished up a live stream on mostly foreign policy. On Fridays, I usually do economic policies, and I do that each day. And today, I just happened to do it today because there was an article about wages, not doing the job they thought. Forcing wages, the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. Guess what? It's not working. So that's the kind of thing I do.
Thank you again. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate you being on the show again. And again, hopefully, maybe in a couple of months, I can finally find my way down there.
Thanks.
Yes.
Talk to you. Bye-bye.